Welcome to Cordell and Cordell's Men's Divorce Podcast, moderated by Managing Partner and CEO Scott Trout, bringing you information for guys before, during, and after divorce, and everything related to family law. This podcast is not to be taken as legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established.
Hey, Scott Trout, Managing Partner, CEO of Cordell and Cordell, and welcome back to the Men's Divorce Podcast. And today, a topic that we haven't discussed in probably quite some time, and it is unique in family law because you have to find an attorney who has experience in this particular area, and that is in dealing with family law issues for service members. And I'm joined by Cassandra Lelek. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. This is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, and I think personally invested in some regard, maybe kind of have an idea, and you can kind of let everybody know kind of why this is an interest to you.
Well, we are, I'm out of the San Diego office, so we have multiple bases around us. You know, we're one of the major stations for the bases, the Marine Corps, Navy, and my husband's actually in the Marines. So it's near and dear to my heart is helping out our service members in situations that are not necessarily issues for a lot of men around the country.
Yeah. I mean, it goes across all issues, particularly for service members. And I think that obviously the best place to start is in the beginning, and that is jurisdiction of service members. And that really because of the nature of what they do, that they may be moving base to base, they may be deployed, they may be overseas. That creates some issues for filing what we call jurisdiction and where the appropriate place is. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have a lot of these come in where a spouse will file on our service members and then they won't know what to do because depending on what their home state is, you know, where they join the military and where they have on their LES as their home state and where they actually were living, where if they have children, where those were living. And I have a lot of these like, oh, well, my home state is, you know, Texas. And so we should do this in Texas. Well, if your children live in California, most of the custody stuff is going to be done in California. And do you want to bifurcate the issues, you know, have them in two different states? And do they have personal jurisdiction over you? You know, if your spouse leaves, do they have jurisdiction? And in California, we have, in a lot of states, we have minimum contacts, which means, hey, if you have minimal contact in this state that wants to move forward with your matter, then the court can say, hey, we have jurisdiction over you. One of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of my service members making is if they feel that there isn't jurisdiction, then they file a response or they appear and they don't specially appear. So if you appear without saying I'm specially appearing, then the court has jurisdiction over you already. You've made a general appearance. So if you have any concerns, you need to talk to an attorney. Make sure that all of your paperwork, all of your filings, all of your appearances, you're letting the court know, hey, I'm specially appearing because I know that this is happening, but I'm not telling the court that I believe that they have jurisdiction over me yet.
Yeah, it's particularly with jurisdiction, you know, it's waivable and it's not in terms of your personal jurisdiction. And whether you need to take action, if you've been served, you know, don't delay. Just pick up the phone, get on our website, cordellcordell.com. You can schedule a consultation just from the website and have it via Zoom, wherever you are stationed. And we can talk a little bit because it gets very, very particular. You mentioned there are legal terms. We talk about minimum contact, home state, where the court will look at. You know, it's interesting in one of our pleading requirements is your spouse an active member of the military and the armed forces, because there's acts that talk about how to deal specifically with active military personnel. And so it is important. So on the flip side, you have military members who also want to file. They're not being served. So kind of what's the kind of thought process for them when they're, you know, maybe deployed somewhere else, temporarily assigned? What do they think about?
You're looking at how long you've been there. If you have children, you're looking at where are the children at, how long have they lived there? Because you can a lot of times fight on two different fronts and say, hey, the kids live here, but I want to do all of the other components of a divorce, you know, asset distribution, debt distribution in a different state. That also increases the cost of your divorce. So it's looking at both states. You're going to want to have a consult in both states to see, hey, is this going to benefit me more to file here? Is it going to benefit me more to file here? I will say that in California, I have had the opportunity to work with a lot of our other offices, and we do this all the time. Is I'll call up, South Carolina, and I'll say, here's what we have. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be better for my guy to stay here? And for sometimes it's like, hey, yeah, stay here for custody and visitation, because a lot of states have written into their statutes that the non-custodial parent only gets these times. It's written in stone. Where in California, we're very much more flexible and fluctuate between the parent schedules, and they're much more adept to when the service member comes back from a deployment. We have laws that say, hey, it goes back to the visitation it was before they left. You don't have to start from zero. So we really want to look at where you are, how long you've been there, and let's see what's better for you, and talk to all the different states, because we have so many offices. All we have to do is pick up and call and say, hey, I know somebody in that state, let me check in. Yeah.
And so the other complication, not a complication, but maybe particular set of rules and things is spousal support. And so how do the branches handle spousal support, what we call alimony maintenance, whatever that may be?
Yeah, so spousal support and child support in every state is standardized. In California, we have a calculator. You put in certain inputs and you get it out. Every branch has their own way of in their military code of conduct about what each service member should be giving their ex for maintenance, either for them. A lot of times it depends on how many children they have. It goes up that way. So what you have to do is look at that service member's branch and say, okay, this is how much they're saying of your income needs to go here. Here's what the state of X says. Which one, first of all, which one is less? Which one do we want to impact? Because once we get into court and we get a court order from any state, those guidelines from the military branches no longer apply. So we want to look at what's in your best interest. Is it a best interest to try to ride this out and say, hey, we'll use what the military said, it's less than what the state says. So we want to make sure that we're always checking all of our bases to make sure that you are doing the best and you're getting the best representation, and we're giving you all your options.
Right. I think this is the key when you have someone in a service member is finding an attorney that is familiar with the particularities, the code of conduct, and what you have to cross-reference that you wouldn't otherwise have to do when representing a civilian. And so that, like you, having experience in that, and I think that's why it's so important. So when it comes to custody, is there anything that they should be concerned about as a service member?
Service members get deployed a lot. They get sent places that they didn't ask to go, quite frankly, and then it takes them away from their families. And we all know that that's a hardship on them. Most states have some sort of some statute that says, hey, that doesn't count. The problem is that's not always necessarily put into play when they get home. So you're going to want to look at which states we're looking at and talking about, hey, who practices what they preach? When they get home, this is really how, this works in actuality, because it's great to say, oh, the statute says when you get home, it goes right back to what you had. When at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it says, the court's not going to do that. And you really want to make sure that what you're filing or how we're trying to get this, get you strategically on the road to the custody and visitation schedule you want, we're doing it correctly, and it's gonna benefit you, because at the end of the day, you signed up to serve this country, and you're being asked to leave your family. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to see them when you come home, or have a 50-50 access to them, or have access and be a part of their lives just because you were sent away. Right. It wasn't like you went on, you signed up for this, yes, but we should be giving them a little bit more grace and latitude to make sure that when they get home, they're taken care of, not only mentally, emotionally, but also making sure that their family, they still have at least their children to be there for.
And what are the protections when they're deployed? Maybe it's in the middle of the case, or maybe after post-order or judgments are entered. Are there protections that are afforded them when they're deployed?
Yeah, so also one of the main things is that you can't take a default judgment against a service member. So if you don't respond because for whatever reason, the court can't just say we're defaulted against you. So that's a major one. The second one is making sure you either have a custody and visitation schedule already in place for now, so that when you come back, you have something to get back to, or you're already showing the court that, hey, before you left and you were told you had to leave, this is the schedule you guys were following, so that when the court looks at it and says, hey, you were a part of this. Keep making sure that you're talking, and it sounds silly, keep a calendar. What time did you have the kids? Mm-hmm. Even if you had them and you think, hey, I'm going on this deployment and I think that my wife might be X, Y, and Z, keep a calendar. This is what you do. This is how you participate. This is what she does. Does she go out with her friends every weekend and you're with the kids? Does she, her work too? What is the schedule so that you get to court, you have it right there and say, you know what, Your Honor, these days, this is what happened. Before I left, this was our schedule. And this is how I've been active in these children's lives before I even left, or even during the times between deployments.
Right. And so, the more complicated, I guess, portion of dealing with service members is not only the division of assets, but we'll get into the retirement part, which I know is a little bit more complex. So talk about the division of assets, like in California being community property. What happens if your spouse commits, or has infidelity issues? What do you do not only, or how do you do it, and how do you prepare kind of in advance of filing?
You want to make sure that you are always getting the statements of all of your accounts, especially if you're going on deployment and you're like, hey, listen, I think something is fishy. You want to make sure you have some sort of statements from what is in those accounts at that time. When you're getting ready for divorce, you have to exchange your deployment declarations of disclosure, your financial documents. We're going to ask you, we need statements from the date of separation, from everything, whether your bank accounts, your mortgage, your retirement, everything you have. So getting that ready beforehand and having that proof, especially if you leave and you come back and there's no more money and you knew when you left there was, you're going to be able to prove that better rather than having to run around like a chicken with their head cut off. Like, where do I get this information? Right. And then we're always, then you're behind the ball. We want to get you ahead of the curve. And then in some states, you might want to file there because states, other states, like I think South Carolina, have issues with if a spouse does cheat on you, they can change the division of the assets. It doesn't have to be 50-50. Yeah. You're going to want to know that too, because in California for spousal support, if they're cohabitating with a person of the opposite sex, that affects any money you have to pay them because they're living with somebody else. Yeah. So making sure that you're doing the best you can to file where we can get the best for you. California doesn't have the issues with infidelity, but also, military. If your spouse is military and there are infidelities, is that something that you want to move forward with? How do we do that? What does that affect? Let's look for the future. If you do this, what does that look like for your future? And making sure we're always on top of not what this decision means short term, but being explained to you what this decision can mean long term.
That is an interesting point with infidelity. I mean, oftentimes, for example, in Missouri, or you hear it's a no-fault state. And that can be misconstrued to mean that, infidelity or bad acts or misconduct doesn't matter. Well, it does. Judges have the authority to sue property division substantially. There's a case in the Southern District of Missouri, 90-10. Now, that's an isolated, probably standalone type of appellate case that authorized it. But it's not unusual to see swings of property or attorney's fees. So I think it's a definitely important question to ask. Does this matter? Can I use this? And oftentimes we use it as a negotiation tool. And we say, look, we're going to bring this up. We know we're going to get a sue of property, and maybe we resolve it far less than that, but it saves us money in the long run. And we look at a cost benefit analysis. So let's talk about retirement. That's the one that I recoil a bit when it comes to military retirement, just because I've done it before. I oftentimes seek out people's advice like yourself who have familiarity with it. Talk a little bit about military retirement and how that's taken care of.
Well, and so a lot of times military retirement is going to depend on when you were in and when you retired and how long you were married. So there's so many things that go into military retirement that is so hard for people to keep track of because it's federal. So the courts really have to follow a lot of the guidelines that the federal government has put into place when it comes to retirement. I think the biggest misconception I hear, which I really, really want everybody to understand, is you don't have to be married for 10 years for her to get anything. In most states, they get half of whatever the marital portion is. So I have this problem when people come in, well, we weren't married for 10 years, she can't get any of my retirement. No, that is not the case. And then people are shell-shocked, and then it's a problem, and then we have issues moving forward because their whole demeanor changes when they realize that's not how it is. The federal government has a 10-10-20 rule and a 20-20-20 rule for the benefits. that a spouse can get from DFAS. They can have access to the base and they can shop at the commissary, and those things don't affect our guys. That doesn't mean anything to our guys. Doesn't matter if they can go on base. What matters is what is the division going to be like? The survivor benefit plan. If they're only supposed to receive, I have a case now, the wife should only receive 12.25% of the full retirement, but he's covering the whole survivor benefit until she signs off to lower the percentage, because we should only be covering the percentage that she's owed, because she's not owed the rest of it. So there's so many internal and date of separation. In California, we use date of separation. Some states use date of divorce. And then, your high 3 retirement comes with, what is your high 3 in the military? How long have you been? When is your date of separation? So these are all very complicated. So when people want to do it themselves, as much as I believe a lot of people are smart enough to be able to handle some of these things, retirement is not one to mess with. DFAS, if you get it wrong, DFAS will be a nightmare for you. Yeah. You'll lose your ability to change the survivor benefit plan. You'll be paying that forever. It's just really one of those things where you need to make sure you have really experienced attorneys if you're not buying them out. Now, if you're buying them out, I just did a case where she waived all of the retirement because she owed so much money other places. And we were able to be like, hey, listen, you pay now or you waive this. And at the end of the day, it was a better deal for my guy.
Yeah.
And it worked out. But if he didn't know that and I didn't know what that meant, it wouldn't have been, and nobody would have known that was an option.
So what's the difference of TSP versus pension?
So TSP is basically like a 401k. That is the easiest one to divide because it is just basically date of marriage, date of separation. It's just like any, IRA, TSP works the same way as a 401k. You just roll it over into a new account, and then it gets the same tax credits. You don't have to, pay taxes on it because it's put into another tax savings account, essentially. With your pension, that one gets so much harder because it's just like any other pension. The division of it is very particular. DFAS is very particular about, well, how many years were you married? Can you do a quadro, a qualified domestic relations order? Will DFAS even pay them directly? Depends on how long they've been married. We're dealing with that right now because if you've not been married long enough and DFAS won't pay directly, you're stuck the rest of your life seeing how much you're getting, trying to figure out what the taxes are, and then paying them their tax-free portion while you pay the tax. It gets really confusing. And so I really hope that we can find a way to make this a little bit more streamlined, because it does get to a place where it is a lot, and it's a lot for everybody to understand and having to deal with this. Yeah,
well, it is. It seems simple, but it's not, especially when you're dealing with military retirement, military assets, the jurisdiction, all of it it requires someone who does it. And, I talk about all the time, when you're getting a divorce, find someone who practices exclusively in family law. Now, when you're getting a divorce and you're a member or you have a family member who's in the military, find someone who not only does family law, but military as well, like yourself. So great stuff. Thanks for joining today.
No problem. Thank you.
So I know you have more questions and you may get answers. Reach out to Cassandra. You can go to the website, CordellCordell.com. You can find her bio and her contact information, schedule an appointment. You can call us at 866-DAD-LAW as well. You can do that just on the website if you want to schedule an appointment. You can do it in person, telephone, Zoom, whatever is appropriate and convenient for you. So information like this, we continue to bring it to you. Subscribe to the podcast and also check out our upcoming virtual town hall where you can log on and ask questions live of a panel of Cordell and Cordell attorneys. We're going to talk a little bit about celebrity divorce, how that affects, you think there's this very big gap between celebrities and you and me? Well, there's not. The issues are the same. Maybe the amount of money is different. But anyway, check that out as well. So until next time, have a great week.